The red and blue lights hadn't even arrived yet, but my quiet evening was already spiraling into something I knew would follow me for the rest of my career. I had just pulled into my driveway, engine ticking as it cooled, when a woman stormed toward my car, phone raised, voice sharp, announcing to the entire street that she was calling 911 on me. She said I was trespassing. She said I was dangerous. She said she wanted me arrested immediately. What she didn't know was that I was the police chief. Minutes earlier, I'd been looking forward to dinner and sleep after a brutal day of meetings, reports, and complaints. Construction crews had blocked part of our street, forcing neighbors to temporarily share access points. Notices were delivered. Signs were posted. I followed every rule. Still, she decided I didn't belong there. Before I could finish explaining, she turned her back and dialed emergency services, narrating a story that grew more dramatic with every sentence. I stood there silently, hands visible, heart steady, listening as she described me as aggressive and threatening. Each word was false, but I knew better than to interrupt. Years in law enforcement teach you one thing very clearly: the truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs time. Neighbors peeked through windows. Curtains shifted. Someone started recording. The street felt smaller, tighter, like it was holding its breath. She paced in front of me, confident, smug, absolutely certain the system would side with her. She kept saying, "Wait until the cops get here," as if those words were a verdict already written. In that moment, I faced a choice. I could reveal who I was and shut it down instantly, or I could let the process play out exactly as it would for anyone else. I chose the second option. Because power only means something when you don't abuse it. The distant sound of sirens finally cut through the air. Her posture straightened. Her smile returned. She folded her arms like someone who believed victory was seconds away. I adjusted my jacket, stepped back from my car, and prepared to speak. What happened next didn't just shock her. It exposed how quickly entitlement collapses when it collides with reality, and how fast confidence turns into chaos when the truth finally steps out of the shadows. That single call set events in motion that would unfold in ways she never imagined, drawing in officers, witnesses, recordings, and consequences she couldn't talk her way out of. By the time the first cruiser stopped and doors opened, the balance of power had already shifted, and the story she told herself was about to collapse completely, right there on the pavement in front of everyone watching in silence. The patrol car doors opened, and the moment froze like a photograph burned into memory. Officer Ramirez stepped out first, scanning the scene with trained calm. Officer Cole followed, already listening to the woman as she rushed toward them, talking over herself, pointing at me like I was proof of some great injustice. She spoke fast, confident, rehearsed. She said I refused to leave her driveway. She said I threatened her. She said she feared for her safety. I stayed where I was, hands relaxed at my sides, face neutral. I'd stood on countless scenes like this, usually on the other side of the conversation. I knew exactly what the officers were looking for: tone, posture, inconsistencies. Truth leaves fingerprints even when people try to wipe it away. Then Ramirez looked at me more closely. I saw it in his eyes before he said my name. The pause. The flicker of recognition. His entire posture changed in a fraction of a second. "Chief," he said, stopping mid-step. Officer Cole turned sharply, eyes widening as realization hit him too. The street went silent. Even the woman stopped talking. For half a second, she laughed. A short, nervous sound. She shook her head and said they had the wrong person. She insisted I was lying. "Criminals pretend to be police all the time," she claimed. Her voice rose again, trying to regain control of the moment slipping through her fingers. Ramirez confirmed my identity over the radio anyway. Calm. Professional. By the book. Dispatch responded instantly, verifying my name, position, and home address. Each word landed like weight. The woman's face drained of color. Her phone lowered slightly, then froze, like she didn't know what to do with it anymore. Officer Cole asked her to step back and explain the situation again, slowly this time. She tried. But the story changed. Details shifted. Timelines bent. Fear replaced confidence. Ramirez walked over to the mailbox and pulled out the construction notice still taped there. He read it aloud. Shared access. Temporary adjustment. Exactly as I'd said. Neighbors had started gathering now, drawn by the lights and tension. A man across the street spoke up, saying he'd seen everything and that I never raised my voice. Another nodded in agreement. The narrative she'd built was collapsing in real time. I finally spoke, explaining calmly that I hadn't revealed my position because I wanted the situation handled fairly. No favors. No intimidation. Just facts. The officers listened, already knowing where this was headed. That was when Ramirez turned to her and explained, very clearly, what filing a false 911 report meant. The word consequences hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. Her hands started shaking. The power she thought she had was gone, replaced by the reality she never expected to face that night. When Officer Ramirez finished explaining the seriousness of a false emergency call, the woman's confidence finally shattered. She started talking again, but this time her words tripped over each other, rushed and uneven. She claimed the dispatcher misunderstood her. She said she felt scared in the moment. She insisted she never meant to accuse me of anything serious. None of it matched the recording already playing quietly from the patrol car speaker. Her own voice echoed back through the night, clear and undeniable. She had used words like aggressive, refusing to leave, and possible threat. Each phrase landed harder than the last. The street felt painfully quiet as everyone listened. There was no arguing with your own voice. Officer Cole asked her a simple question: why didn't she read the notice on her mailbox or talk to me before calling 911? She hesitated. Her eyes darted toward the neighbors watching. Then she snapped, saying she shouldn't have to share space with someone she didn't trust. The implication hung in the air, ugly and obvious. A few people shifted uncomfortably. One neighbor shook his head slowly. That moment changed everything. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was intent. Ramirez's tone remained calm, but firmer now. He explained that emergency services are not a tool for control or intimidation. They are a resource for real danger. Misusing them puts lives at risk. He told her she would be cited for filing a false report and misuse of emergency services. Procedure. Documentation. Court follow-up. Her shoulders slumped. The phone in her hand finally dropped to her side. She stopped arguing. Stopped recording. Reality had replaced adrenaline. She asked if this could just go away. Ramirez answered honestly. No. I watched quietly, not with satisfaction, but with something closer to disappointment. I'd seen this pattern countless times on duty. People assume authority will automatically side with them. They don't expect evidence to matter. They don't expect accountability. As Ramirez filled out paperwork, another neighbor spoke up, confirming again that I had been calm the entire time. Others nodded. The truth no longer needed defending. It stood on its own. When the citation was handed to her, she stared at it like it was written in another language. The performance was over. What remained was consequence. She walked back toward her house slowly, no longer angry, no longer powerful, just painfully aware that a single phone call had rewritten her night in a way she could never undo. The patrol car lights dimmed. The officers turned to me, asking quietly if I was all right. I nodded. I was. But I also knew this moment wouldn't end when the street went dark. The real impact was only beginning, and the lesson from that driveway was about to travel much further than any of us standing there realized. When the patrol cars finally pulled away, the street fell into an uneasy quiet that felt heavier than the noise before. The flashing lights disappeared around the corner, but the tension they left behind lingered like a fog that refused to lift. Neighbors slowly retreated into their homes, doors closing softly, conversations reduced to whispers behind curtains. What had just happened would be discussed for weeks, maybe longer. I stood alone in my driveway, staring at the spot where my car had been parked, letting the moment settle. As police chief, I was used to handling conflict, but experiencing it as a resident, as a neighbor, hit differently. The badge doesn't protect you from being falsely accused. If anything, it challenges you to respond with even more restraint. Across the street, her house was dark. No porch light. No movement behind the windows. She hadn't apologized. Not yet. I didn't expect one. Embarrassment has a way of silencing people faster than any warning ever could. Still, silence doesn't erase actions. It only gives them space to echo. I went inside, set my keys on the counter, and finally allowed myself to breathe deeply. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Messages from officers. From command staff. From friends who had already heard bits and pieces of the story. I replied briefly to each one, assuring them everything was handled by the book. No special treatment. No exceptions. Later that night, I stepped back outside to grab the mail. The construction notice was still taped to the mailbox, exactly where it had been all along. A simple piece of paper that could have prevented everything. I stared at it for a long moment, thinking about how often conflicts start not from facts, but from assumptions people never bother to check. I thought about how easily the situation could have gone wrong. A raised voice. A defensive gesture. A different officer arriving with incomplete information. The line between calm resolution and disaster is thinner than most people realize. That's why truth matters. That's why patience matters. As police chief, I'd spoken countless times about misuse of emergency services. That night turned theory into reality. A false call isn't harmless. It pulls officers away from real emergencies. It escalates situations that never needed to exist. It leaves scars on trust that take time to heal. Before turning in for the night, I looked down the street one last time. Everything looked normal again. Quiet. Ordinary. But I knew better. That driveway had become a lesson in accountability, not just for her, but for everyone who witnessed it. And I knew the consequences of that call were far from over. They were just beginning to unfold. By the next morning, the story had already moved beyond our street. Not officially, not publicly, but quietly through phone calls, text chains, and half-whispered conversations. In a town like ours, word travels fast, especially when flashing lights are involved. I knew it was only a matter of time before the incident reached my office in a formal way, and I welcomed that. Transparency isn't optional when you wear the badge. It's required. At headquarters, I requested a full internal review. Some people were surprised by that. Others weren't. I needed it documented, clear, and unquestionable. The body cam footage, the 911 recording, witness statements, and the construction notices were all pulled. Every detail was examined as if I were any other citizen. No shortcuts. No protection. That mattered more to me than comfort. The review confirmed what everyone already knew. The officers acted professionally. The call was false. The response was appropriate. Procedure was followed from start to finish. That confirmation wasn't about clearing my name. It was about reinforcing trust in the system. If leadership isn't willing to be scrutinized, accountability collapses from the top down. Meanwhile, her situation became more serious than she expected. The citation for misuse of emergency services wasn't just a fine. It came with a court date. The recorded call left little room for reinterpretation. Exaggeration. False claims. Intent. Words spoken in anger don't disappear just because regret shows up later. That afternoon, a handwritten note appeared in my office mailbox. No name. No return address. Inside was a short apology. It wasn't polished. It wasn't defensive. It admitted fear, embarrassment, and poor judgment. She said she never imagined things would go that far. Most people don't. That's the problem. I folded the note carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. Apologies don't erase consequences, but they do signal awareness. Whether it was genuine remorse or fear-driven regret wasn't for me to decide. The court would handle the legal side. Life would handle the rest. What struck me most wasn't the punishment. It was the shift. Neighbors became more communicative. Disputes were handled face-to-face instead of through authority. Officers reported fewer unnecessary calls in the area. One incident had quietly recalibrated behavior. That's how accountability works when it's visible. It doesn't humiliate. It corrects. It reminds people that systems aren't weapons, and authority isn't a shortcut to being right. That driveway call changed more than one evening. It changed how people thought about power, truth, and consequences. And as the days passed, I realized the lesson wasn't finished yet. It was still unfolding, in ways none of us could fully see at the time. By the end of the week, the incident had reached the wider community, not through headlines, but through conversations, questions, and quiet concern. I decided it was time to address it directly, not to defend myself, but to protect trust. At a scheduled community meeting, I stood at the podium without notes, knowing rehearsed words would weaken the message I needed to deliver. I explained what happened in plain terms. No names. No insults. No dramatic flourishes. Just facts. I described the construction notice, the shared driveway, the call to 911, and the outcome. I emphasized that misuse of emergency services slows responses for real emergencies and puts officers and civilians at risk. The room stayed silent, the kind of silence that means people are listening instead of waiting to argue. Then I said something many didn't expect. I confirmed that Internal Affairs had reviewed the incident fully. Body cameras. Audio recordings. Witness statements. Everything. I told them the review included my actions as well. Accountability, I said, only works when leadership submits to it first. Heads nodded. A few people exhaled, visibly relieved. After the meeting, residents approached me quietly. One admitted they had almost called police during a neighbor dispute and thought better of it afterward. Another thanked me for not escalating the situation that night. Those conversations mattered more than any official report. They meant the lesson was landing. The woman did not attend the meeting, but later that evening, her attorney contacted the department, confirming she would comply with all court requirements. No excuses. No counterclaims. Just acceptance. That message said more than anger ever could. In the days that followed, the story faded from conversation, replaced by ordinary concerns. But the impact remained. Officers referenced the incident during briefings. Neighbors communicated more directly. Fewer unnecessary calls came in from the area. Change rarely announces itself. It shows up quietly, in behavior. That night in my driveway reminded me why restraint matters more than authority. Power can end an argument, but fairness prevents the next one. If there's anything worth carrying forward from this, it's that truth doesn't need force. It needs patience, transparency, and the courage to let the process work, even when it would be easier not to. Moments like this don't just test systems, they test character. They ask whether we choose dominance or dignity, speed or care. That choice shapes outcomes long after paperwork ends. I've learned that calm leadership travels further than commands, and fairness outlasts fear. When people see the process honored, even uncomfortable truths become easier to accept. That understanding, built slowly and visibly, is how communities heal and move forward together. Especially when mistakes happen close to home, where emotions run high and patience feels scarce for everyone. A few weeks passed, and the incident slowly drifted out of daily conversation, but it never fully left my mind. Some lessons don't fade with time, they sharpen. I noticed subtle changes everywhere. Officers were more deliberate during calls, neighbors more willing to talk things out before escalating. What happened in that driveway had quietly reset something. Then one afternoon, I ran into her. It was at a small grocery store near our neighborhood. I was picking up a few items after work when I felt that familiar sense of being watched. I turned and saw her standing near the carts, frozen in place. She looked nothing like she had that night. No confidence. No raised phone. No sharp posture. Just uncertainty and discomfort written clearly across her face. For a moment, we both stood there, unsure who would speak first. I could have walked past. Legally, professionally, emotionally I owed her nothing. But leadership doesn't end when it's inconvenient. It shows up precisely when walking away would be easier. I nodded politely. That was all it took. She swallowed hard and apologized. Not hurried. Not defensive. Just honest. She said she replayed that night constantly, wishing she had chosen conversation instead of control. She admitted embarrassment, fear, and the realization that she had let assumptions override reason. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop talking. She needed to say it. I listened without interrupting. I didn't soften the truth, but I didn't harden it either. I told her apologies matter, but accountability matters more. I reminded her that false accusations don't just affect one person, they strain systems, endanger others, and erode trust. She nodded, tears forming, not dramatic, just real. That moment wasn't redemption. It wasn't forgiveness. It was something quieter, understanding. We parted without shaking hands, without closure wrapped in a bow. Just two people carrying the weight of a moment that changed both of us. Driving home, I thought about how consequences extend far beyond citations and court dates. They live in grocery store aisles, awkward silences, and late-night reflection. That's where real learning happens, not under flashing lights, but in private discomfort. Not every person who misuses authority reflects. Many double down. But when reflection does happen, it deserves space, not spectacle. That encounter reinforced why restraint matters. Why public humiliation rarely teaches anything lasting. Why dignity, even when undeserved, can sometimes open the door to change. That driveway incident was never about winning. It was about truth meeting power and revealing which one actually holds weight. And sometimes, the most meaningful outcomes don't happen on the night everything explodes, but weeks later, when the noise is gone and accountability finally sinks in. After that encounter, I started thinking more deeply about authority not as a title, but as a test. Most people believe power is proven in moments of control, when someone asserts dominance and forces an outcome. But real authority, the kind that lasts, reveals itself in restraint. That night in the driveway, and weeks later in a grocery store aisle, reminded me of that truth more clearly than any training manual ever could. I began sharing the incident anonymously during academy sessions. No names. No locations. Just facts. I described how a routine call can turn volatile when false information enters the system, how officers' safety depends on accuracy, and how ego can be more dangerous than any weapon. I told recruits that professionalism isn't measured by how loud you speak or how quickly you assert control, but by how steady you remain when someone tries to provoke you. The room always grew quiet. They understood this wasn't theory. This was lived experience. I also reflected on how easily systems can be misunderstood by the public. Too many people see 911 as a tool of convenience, a way to win an argument. They don't see the ripple effects, the delayed response to real emergencies, the escalation of unnecessary confrontations, the permanent records created by impulsive decisions. Once a call is made, it doesn't vanish. It follows you. Standing in my driveway one evening, weeks after everything happened, I watched kids riding bikes and neighbors chatting casually. The street felt peaceful again. Ordinary. But I knew how fragile that calm really was. All it takes is one assumption, one phone call made in anger, and normal life fractures instantly. The badge doesn't make someone right. It doesn't guarantee fairness. It's a reminder, constant and unforgiving, that every action carries weight. Authority without humility becomes dangerous. Enforcement without empathy becomes unstable. That's the balance we're sworn to protect. I never told this story to embarrass anyone. I told it to warn. To remind people that systems are only as just as the honesty they're fed. Abuse them, and they respond harshly. Respect them, and they protect everyone equally. That woman tried to use the police as leverage. Instead, the moment became a mirror, reflecting character, bias, and accountability in real time. Not with shouting. Not with force. But with process. In the end, that's what authority truly is, the willingness to let truth do the work, even when it would be easier to end the conversation with power. Especially then. Looking back now, that night in my driveway stands out not because of the confrontation, but because of what it revealed about truth, power, and human behavior. The concrete never changed. The law never changed. What changed was perception. One person believed authority could be summoned like a weapon, shaped by emotion, and aimed at a stranger. What she learned instead was that systems built on truth don't bend easily, no matter how loud the demand. I still park in the same place every night. The driveway looks ordinary, almost boring, but it carries a quiet reminder. Leadership isn't proven in offices, meetings, or speeches. It's proven in moments when you're falsely accused and choose patience anyway. When you could end the situation instantly, but allow the process to protect everyone equally. That restraint matters more than rank ever will. The officers who responded that night did exactly what they were trained to do. They listened. They verified. They followed procedure. No shortcuts. No assumptions. That consistency is what separates justice from chaos. When people see the system work fairly, even uncomfortable outcomes become easier to accept. For anyone watching this story, here's what matters most. Before you reach for authority, reach for understanding. Before you call for power, ask whether you're prepared to face the consequences if you're wrong. Emergency services are not customer support. They are a lifeline. Misusing them doesn't just affect one person, it puts others at risk in ways you may never see. That woman didn't lose because I was police chief. She lost the moment her story couldn't stand up to the truth. Titles fade. Uniforms change. But facts remain, steady and unmovable. Truth doesn't rush. It doesn't shout. It waits. I didn't share this story for sympathy or praise. I shared it as a reminder that accountability isn't punishment, it's correction. It's how systems stay strong and communities stay safe. When honesty leads, power follows the right path. That night could have ended differently. It could have escalated. It could have gone wrong. Instead, it became a lesson visible to everyone watching, including me. A lesson about restraint, humility, and the quiet strength of letting the truth speak for itself. If this story stays with you, let it be for that reason. Not the meltdown. Not the shock. But the reminder that truth, when given time and space, always outlasts entitlement, fear, and false authority. And in the end, That's what justice is supposed to do.